What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40K. In this one, I'm going to be explaining my fan lore on my rendition of the 2nd Legion Primarch, which I'm calling her Micte Mori. So, recently I've been trying to create the lore on her origins, who she is, what she embodies, and that type of thing. However, I've been having issues with my editing software where it's just been a mess. The rendering won't work, sometimes it just exits and stuff gets deleted and whatnot. So the Emperor's Edict of Obliteration transcended time and space, and I'm having trouble putting out that lore. But anyway, I did put it out a few days ago, so you guys can check it out. Links will be there so you guys can see it. But I wanted to explain it more fully so you guys get the full picture instead of just part 1 of a 3-part series. Going over who the Primarch is. So basically, it is the 2nd Lost Legion, or I guess I should call her the Forgotten Primarch. Whereas we all know, the 2nd and the 11th have been lost to time. The Emperor enacted his Edict of Obliteration, basically preventing any symbols, likeliness, anything that has to do with the Primarch and their Legion to be expunged from history. So as it's basically like they never existed. But there are certain things that give us clues that they did exist, and a little bit into the insight of their personality, who they were, that kind of thing. So using all that, I've gathered it into a that's what I like to do with my fan lore, because I want it to make the most sense in the setting of 40k. And a lot of times, because we used to do a series way back in the day where we would do like Fan Lore Fridays, where you guys would send us information on your own fan lore chapters or Space Marines or any other Xenos, and we'd make videos out of them. And a lot of times we would get stuff that wouldn't really make sense in the setting. Like, for example, we would have a Primarch that's stronger than the Emperor. Yeah, you're already going too deep into the fantasy aspect of it. And I could see how that would easily happen, seeing as how people like to embellish their own creations. But in my opinion, it makes more sense if it's grounded in the world of 40k and it makes sense. So hopefully I can do that with this Primarch. And it's very polarizing, because one of the things that I changed about her is that, exactly, she is a female Primarch. As we all know, there are 20 Primarchs, and they're all known to be based on the image, the likeliness of the Emperor, which happens to be the true man. Which, I don't even know how that makes sense, because technically isn't the Emperor 12 shamans fused into one? But anyway, we've gotten new information of Erda, the Perpetual that helped the Emperor create the Primarchs, and so I kind of took that with my own information and made it my own. So basically, Micte Mori is a Primarch that was about 90% created under Erda's I guess scientific expertise. The Emperor did have a part to play in this, since you do need the genes of both the Emperor and Erda to create the Primarchs. So technically there are 21 Primarchs. 20 of them are still male, because you have Alfarius and Omegon, the twin Primarchs. And then you have the outlier. You have Micte Mori, a Primarch that is more based on Erda than anything. She is a female, and as we all know, Erda didn't want her Primarch children to become warriors of war, bloodshed, and conquest. She wanted a better life for them, and that's kind of what led to the ruinous powers and the Primarchs being flung across the galaxy. But, you know, try as much as you will, the Emperor did find them, and we all know what happened with like the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy and whatnot. But to further push her plans along, Erda had to create a Primarch that was different from the rest, in that all the other Primarchs are psychers in some shape, way, or form. Others can be as strong as Magnus, where they can literally, grab the warp energies and bend them to the will. And you have other Primarchs, such as Guilliman, that they still have a presence in the warp. They still are psychers to an extent, but they can't really do like mind bullets and warp lightning and stuff like that. But with Micte Mori, she is a blank, a pariah, a null. They essentially ripped the soul out of her during her creation, her gestation pod, and she is a soulless being. Because of this, she cannot have psychic powers, and she has an aura of dread around her. So it's very hard for her to be social, which also does kind of play with another statement from Fulgrim that said that the second was cold and humorless, very stoic. So that aura of dread plays into that. But yeah, so let's go into the video that I made, and I'll try and answer your questions to the best of my ability to see if they make sense, to see if it fits in this world of Warhammer 40K. So the big elephant in the room is obviously you have a female Primarch. That means female Space Marines. That goes against the lore. What are you doing? You are stupid. So yeah, female Space Marines will not be in my fan lore. Like I said before, I try to stay within the bounds of the established 40K lore, and it is stated multiple times that in order to make Space Marines, you need male anatomy, because of how the gene seed adheres to the chromosomes and whatnot. So because of the whole gene seed implantation process, her Astartes are still going to be male Space Marines. Now that's not to say that female Space Marines are not possible. I mean, we've seen some crazy stuff going on from like Belisarius Cawl and Fabius Bio and whatnot. I mean, it was heretical to mess around with the gene seed implantation, and Cawl did just that in creating the Primaris. So that's not to say they're not going to happen, but at least in my fan lore, there will be no female Space Marines. Now, how does that make sense? Why is there a female Primarch, but her, soldiers are males? Gene splicing, gene augmentation, and stuff like that. Even though the Primarch needed to be female in order for the pariah gene to adhere, as we've seen with like the Sisters of Silence, they're all female and they're all pariahs. That was also the case with the Primarch here, but because of that, her Astartes were kind of cursed, and we get to see that, well, her Astartes, they're known as the Lunarian Guard. However, through all the stuff that happened with like the heresy and all that, and the Edict of Obliteration, the Emperor didn't want these things to be known. So a lot of these soldiers of the 2nd Legion got inducted into the Ultramarines and other Space Marine chapters, or I guess legions at the time. But they did have a huge group of them coalesce and create into their own chapter, a chapter that is known as the Firehawks. And if you're aware of what the Firehawks become, they are indeed cursed, and they are what most believe to be the Legion of the Damned. So this all plays with the curse that Erda kind of indirectly put upon creating a female Primarch, messing with her genes, affecting her Astartes, which then still affected them thousands of years, after the Edict of Obliteration happened, and they became the Legion of the Damned. Now, going back to what you guys were talking about, they said, this is a female Primarch and whatnot. Like, Fulgrim said that the second was cold, humorless, a grim demeanor, and didn't really speak. So yes, that is correct. By the time Micte Mori was founded by the Emperor and brought back into the Great Crusade, she had bound a demon within herself. Now, how is this possible? It's because this demon was so powerful that just being near a pariah, wasn't enough to banish it back into the warp. It was just enough to kind of quell it. So she took this demon, bound it inside herself with the wards of binding that she knew and she learned from the time that she was on her homeworld after the spreading of the Primarchs. Continuing on with this, she would always need to be whispering prayers and hymns in order to allow the demon to not speak and whisper to her. So we all know demons are there to corrupt. Demons are there to just make things worse. So Micte Mori didn't want to have these whispers into her ears, these sweet nothings kind of force her hand to do one thing or the other. So that is why she is standoffish. That is why you never really hear her speak, because she's always whispering, she's always muttering these prayers to quell and pacify the demon bound within her. The other thing about her being cold and humorless, she's a freaking pariah. She gives off an aura of dread. And of course, all the Primarchs being psychers, they are super like affected by this aura. So that is why most of the time these Primarchs see her as being standoffish, like they don't want to get near her, that type of thing. And also her armor is inscribed with runes of warding within it. So you don't actually see these runes by looking outside, it's actually on the inside of the armor, and she mostly keeps this armor on, again, to quell the demon that she has pacified within her. So because of this, most people, most of like the remembrancers, or any personnel that was on her flagship or anything like that, that is why they never saw or assumed that she was a female Primarch. Anytime anybody saw her, it was with full armor on, and clearly an armored Space Marine looks like any other Space Marine, or I guess I should say an armored Primarch would look like any other Primarch. So that's the case. Continuing on, like, what is her theme, her symbology? So her name is Micte Mori, which stems from both like Aztec and Mayan influences of like the goddess of death and the goddess of the moon. Later on, she does get involved with the Rangdan crusade and has to kind of sacrifice herself in a way to basically end this Rangdan genocide that has been spreading and almost conquering the Imperium, which basically leads her to a mummified state, and she kind of unleashes the demon that was bound within her to kind of quell this mind control, I guess you could say. Because when it comes to the Rangdan, there's very little lore on that as well. We do know it happened during the Great Crusade. We do know it was an event that led to thousands of deaths and almost the end of the Imperium through some type of mind control or some type of like parasite or something like that. And it is established that pretty much either the 2nd or the 11th or a few other Space Marine chapters were almost destroyed. So yeah, this was a huge thing in 40k, and it's a surprise we have so little lore on it. Probably because the Imperium wouldn't want this type of information to leak out. So that is why it's kind of kept secret, because, you know, the Imperium is supposed to be this like super power in the galaxy, and if it's known that it almost was taken down, then that kind of leads them, like people, to believe that, oh, maybe we're not as safe as we should be, or it leads other, you know, Xeno empires or chaos to say like, well, the Imperium was almost taken down once, you know, doesn't mean that they're impervious, so we can try and maybe accomplish what the Rangdan couldn't. So yeah, so that's a different tangent, answering 2 questions there, but yeah, going back to Micte Mori, yes, she's essentially embodies the personification of death, rebirth, devotion, because she is head over heels devoted to the Emperor, which is funny because that's kind of the opposite of what Erdo wanted her to be. But yeah, she sees the Emperor as a god. There were a few times, I guess you can say, that she interacted with Lorgar, and that kind of almost helped him. Well, it was chaos that kind of pushed him towards like the Lectitio Divinatus and whatnot. But yes, her seeing the Emperor as like a god and speaking with Lorgar a few times did kind of help him get nudged into the whole theology of things with the god Emperor and him going to chaos and whatnot. But yeah, she is all about death, rebirth. She was pushed to a homeworld with like 7 moons, and the homeworld that she was on was a very religious one. So it's a very religious theme to her. Her Space Marines at the time, the Lunarian Guard, have a lot of like Catholic symbologies with them, with like skulls and saints and that kind of stuff. So if you look into Aztec, Mayan culture, if you look into the religion, I believe, La Santa Muerte, and like the Day of the Dead, that also has a lot of themes that I pulled from, which you'll see in later videos. And even in the current times of Warhammer 40k, there is a order of Sisters of Battle that see her as a saint. They actually come from the homeworld where she exiled herself and mummified, and they see her as the Saint Ixchel, which is another name for, I believe it was the lunar goddess of the Aztecs. So that's what they know her as, that's what they revere, and they are pretty, I guess you could say, pretty heretical, pretty blasphemous in how this order of Sisters of Battle fight. They are nicknamed the Sisters of Blasphemy, since they also bind their bodies with demons. They're essentially all demon hosts. Those that cannot quell the demon and control it are chained up and kind of released haphazardly into the battlefield to die, at least for the Emperor, being controlled by the demon. But yeah, because of this, they're very gaunt looking. It's very skeletal. Their war paint is that kind of like the sugar skull and whatnot. So essentially female Legion of the Damned. So that's my theme with having female warriors incorporated into her lore. They're not Space Marines, they are Sisters of Battle, but their armor is very similar to that of the Legion of the Damned. And yeah, I think that's all I can say before my editing software says no. So if you guys have any other questions or anything like that, leave them down below. I'll answer them in another Q&A. If you guys want more lore on Mikta Mori, I'll be giving it to you in pieces. Like I said, part 1 is already there. You can probably check it out linked at this video, or you can find it in the playlist. And if you guys want my rendition on the 11th Legion, which is another lost Legion, it's there. I got a whole playlist on it, way more than I have on this one. It's the Celestial Sons and their Primarch Alec Elric. So go ahead and check it out. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. This has been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I'll see you then. Peace.